A Song of Ice and Fire is a series riddled with dreams and prophecies. And in this video, we're going to discuss ones that hint towards events in the Winds of Winter, or a dream of spring, or ones that hint towards secrets in the past, like Ned's dreams about Lyanna. This isn't a video about every dream or prophecy, because some of them have already been answered, like Dany's dreams that foreshadow the birth of her dragons, or Bran's dream about Ned being dead before official news has reached Winterfell. Those are clear in their meaning. This video is about the ones that are mysterious, that may hint towards future events, or deeply held secrets. And with that, let's start with the second dream in the series. In A Game of Thrones, Bran has a dream, one where he's visited by the three-eyed crow. Bran also sees various locations around Westeros in this dream, but one in particular stands out. It's far beyond the wall, at the edge of the world, and it's something called the Heart of Winter. And he looked past the wall, past endless forests cloaked in snow, past the frozen shore, and the great blue-white rivers of ice, and the dead plains where nothing grew or lived. North and north and north he looked, to the curtain of light at the end of the world. And then beyond that curtain, he looked deep into the heart of winter, and then he cried out, afraid, and the heat of his tears burned on his cheeks. So what is this heart of winter? What could make Bran cry out in fear, and make the three-eyed crow say, now you know why you must live? It seems that, without a doubt, or at the very least as confident as we can be with no Winds of Winter, this Heart of Winter has something to do with the others. What else could invoke such fear? What else could fit with the phrase that winter is coming? What else would be that far north? This is more so a question of whether the Heart of Winter is merely symbolism for the others, a way to signify their presence which is soon to threaten Westeros, or if it's hinting at something more. The others disappeared for thousands of years, and this Heart of Winter may be where they rested, and waited for the day to come south once more. It could be their home of sorts. They are alive, presumably they need a place to stay, and do whatever ice creatures do. Some have suggested that this could also be the place where they create new others. Seeing as they accept humans as sacrifices, as we saw with Crastor, who gave his sons to them, they may use this place to create new others. Could be at this Heart of Winter where they perform the sacrifice. So at the very least, we can say that the Heart of Winter is referencing the others and their terrifying nature. But it could also be something more concrete, like their home or a place where they create new others, or some other unpleasant thing involving them that would make Bran realize why he must live. The Heart of Winter could also be a cut plotline regarding the others, seeing as it's mentioned in the first book, and never again. In A Dance with Dragons, Bran arrives at Bloodraven's cave and begins his training in skin-changing, greensight, and entering the weirwood trees to see visions of the past. In Bran's last POV chapter, Bran 3, A Dance with Dragons, Bran bears witness to some of those visions of the past buried deep within the network of collective weirwood memory. The first memory is of Bran's father, Ned Stark. He's sitting on a rock by the deep pool in the Godswood, cleaning ice, his Valyrian sword. When Bran sees him, he whispers, Winterfell, and Ned looks up, saying, who's there? Bran is scared and pulls away, returning to reality. But Bloodraven claims that you can't influence the past nor speak to them, but Bran seems to think Ned heard him. Bloodraven denies this by saying it must have been the wind, but is that true? Bloodraven can't influence the past, but maybe Bran can. In the second memory, Ned is noticeably younger and he's praying in front of the Godswood, praying for what must be Jon Snow and Robb Stark to grow up as brothers, and for Catelyn Stark to forgive Ned for bringing Jon home. Once again, Bran attempts to speak, and Ned does look up with a confused face, but he doesn't say anything. There are other memories after that. One that is likely of Lyanna Stark, then one of the Starks long past, and then, the last one, is a man being sacrificed at the foot of the weirwood, his blood seeping into the soil and roots. You could say that the first two memories where Bran seems to have spoken to Ned are both simply examples of misdirection. There is definitely plausible deniability with the excuse of Ned having just heard the wind. And Bloodraven does say you can't influence the past, and he would know best. But, when combined with the fact that the Hold the Door Hodor twist is confirmed in the books, well, that means Bran has some way of interacting and affecting the past. Remember, G.R. Martin has said, it's an obscenity to go into somebody's mind, so Bran may be responsible for Hodor's simplicity due to going into his mind so powerfully that it rippled back through time. The whole explanation of Bran's powers, the whole question of time and causality, Can we affect the past? Is time a river you can only sail one way, or an ocean that can be affected wherever you drop into it? These are issues I want to explore in the book. Sure sounds like we're gonna see time travel. Anybody can tell you that time travel is a dangerous mechanic for a story. It can very easily ruin a good plot and derail every aspect of a story. But not always, and J.R.R. Martin has done time travel before, in a short story called Under Siege. Still, it's difficult to theorize how exactly time travel and which one will affect the past will be used in this story, other than Hodor, of course. Some fans have suggested that time-traveling Bran has secretly been behind various parts or all of the story. Anything from Ned Stark's death, to Jon Snow becoming Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, to a million other parts of this story. There's also been discussion that Bran may be trapped in a sort of Groundhog Day loop, trying different things to defeat the others, but each one fails, so he has to go all the way back and do it again. Unfortunately, it's difficult to put together a theory with tons of evidence. Remember, Bran only has 2 chapters with Bloodraven. But in conclusion, we can say that there's going to be time travel in this story, as we see with the Weirwood memory with Ned Stark, and knowledge of the Hodor twist. Somehow, someway, time travel will be used other than those 2 moments to affect the story. We can say at the very least that whatever Bran is doing in the past, it's almost certainly to ensure that humanity wins against the others, whether that be a military victory or some kind of treaty or pact with them. In A Feast for Crows, we learn that once, as a young girl, Cersei Lannister visited Maggy the Frog, a woman said to be able to tell one's fortunes. During this encounter, Maggy says that Cersei may ask 3 questions about her future and no more. Cersei first asks if she will marry Prince Rhaegar. Maggy says no. Instead, she will wed the king. Then Cersei asks if she will be queen, and Maggy says yes, at least until another, younger and more beautiful, will cast her down and take everything she holds dear. For her final question, Cersei asks if she will have children. Maggy says yes, she will have 3, and that for all 3, gold shall be their crowns, and gold their shrouds. And also, when your tears have drowned you, the Valanquar shall wrap his hands about your pale white throat and choke the life from you. Examining Maggy's prophecy, it's clear that some of it has already come true. Cersei did indeed marry a king, although it wasn't Rhaegar, but instead Robert Baratheon. She also has 3 children, and one is dead, with the fates of the other 2 on shaky ground. Tommen and Myrcella are not likely to survive the series. But these things are well established, and it's the younger and more beautiful queen and the Valanquar, which are still unknown to us. As to the queen, some have suggested it's Margaery Tyrell. She is younger, she is the queen, and to some she is more beautiful. There is some speculation as to whether Margaery is a pawn in the Game of Thrones, or if she's an active participant who is seeking total Tyrell domination of Westeros. If the latter is true, then she could very well be the person who will take all that Cersei holds dear. Cersei already fears the influence Margaery has over Tommen, and maybe she fears that Margaery will be able to sway Tommen to her side for good. But Cersei also cares about Jaime and Myrcella, at least in her own twisted way. And it's unclear how exactly Margaery would be responsible for taking everything Cersei cares about. Although honestly, this problem applies to all the candidates. None of them really seem like they would or even could take away all that Cersei cares about. Some could take Tommen and Myrcella, or just Tommen, or just Myrcella, or Jaime, but all 3 is difficult to put together. But seeing as Margaery is younger, could be seen as more beautiful, and has influence over Tommen, she's certainly a candidate. It also helps that she is a queen. Another option is Daenerys. She fits the bill pretty well, and seeing as she's coming for the throne, she may very well cast Cersei down. And seeing as Tommen and Myrcella would both be threats to her crown, she would definitely find a way to ensure that they are out of Cersei's hands and are unable to make a claim to the throne, whether that be via holding them hostage or other unsavory measures. Although Tommen and Myrcella may not be alive by the time Dany actually makes it to Westeros, but they could be. The books will, after all, be different. This leaves us with Jaime. Maybe Jaime will enlist with Dany, but I find that very unlikely, seeing as Tyrion is probably going to be Hand of the Queen, and those 2 characters are probably not going to have some sort of reconciliation. Tyrion is feeling particularly bloodthirsty in A Dance with Dragons, and probably will feel the same way in The Winds of Winter. Still, maybe Jaime will help with the Battle of the Dawn, and since Dany will be over there, maybe that counts as Jaime being taken away. It doesn't perfectly work, but Dany is still a candidate. Another option is Arianne. Like Dany and Margaery, she is younger and could be seen as more beautiful. Myrcella being in Dorne does mean Arianne has a say in her fate. Probably. But Tommen and Jaime It's a little more unclear. If Arianne marries Aegon and Aegon takes King's Landing, maybe they will take Tommen away from Cersei. Or kill him, of course. But Tommen could also be dead before they arrive. That would leave us with just Jaime, and yeah, there really isn't a great explanation here. Arianne at this point has no way or reason to take Jaime away. Obviously, if he fights against them, then he would be a legitimate target, but right now, Jaime's story is so far away from King's Landing that it just doesn't really work. One, because their stories are so far apart, but also, why would Jaime turn against his own family? Jaime may not like Cersei that much in A Feast for Crows, and their stories have definitely diverged, but Jaime wouldn't turn against his own family. Lastly, some have noted the phrasing, "Queen you shall be," the old woman had promised, with her lips still wet and red and glistening, until there comes another, younger and more beautiful, to cast you down and take all that you hold dear. As you may have already noted yourself, the phrasing doesn't require the younger, more beautiful person to be a queen. So there is a chance, as some have suggested, that this prophecy is referring to Brienne. Brienne is younger, and while physically she is not described as beautiful, one could say that her actions, and her soul, if you will, is beautiful. In A Song of Ice and Fire, Brienne stands among the few genuinely moral characters, which in its own way is beautiful. Also, people in an ironic and cruel way refer to her as Brienne the Beauty, and perhaps this name somehow fooled Maggie as she peered into the future. Jaime also has a dream while resting his head on a weirwood stump, in which, while in the dark caverns beneath Casterly Rock, he and Brienne are visited and later attacked by ghosts of Jaime's past. But the important part for this section is that when Jaime sees Brienne, he thinks, in this light, she could almost be a beauty. Brienne stands to take away one of the most important people in Cersei's life, Jaime, who Cersei holds, well, honestly too dearly. Although it does say take all you hold dear, and Brienne would never harm Cersei's children, who are the only other people that Cersei holds dear. But maybe they'll be out of the story by that point, and it won't matter. Brienne is a clever twist if it's true. She's definitely a dark horse candidate, and she would fit in with how J.R.R. Martin executes prophecies in A Song of Ice and Fire. That is to say, like most prophecies, their outcome, their conclusion is not the one you assume, and it's something unexpected. For now, though, we can safely say that the person who would take away everything that Cersei holds dear is probably Margaery, Daenerys, or Arianne. But it could also be Brienne, which would be a fitting twist. This leaves us with the Valancourt, who will wrap his hands around Cersei's pale white throat and choke the life from her. We are told that Valancourt means little brother in Valyrian, so Cersei believes that it's Tyrion, and she has every right to think so. Tyrion wants Cersei dead, and he wants to kill her himself, and if given the opportunity, he would no doubt do that. Also, he is her little brother. So reading the prophecy as straightforward as possible, the only reasonable conclusion is that it's Tyrion. But many fans think Tyrion is a red herring, and J.R.R. Martin has said that prophecies shouldn't be too easy to understand. Quote, "Prophecies are, you know, a double-edged sword. You have to handle them very carefully. I mean, they can add depth and interest to a book, but you don't want them to be too literal or too easy." So taking that all in, Tyrion being the Valancourt is unlikely. The other likeliest option is Jaime. It is interesting to note that we are specifically told that Cersei was the twin who came out first, so technically Jaime is Cersei's younger brother, if only by a few moments. Jaime being the Valancourt is a clever twist. Cersei would never imagine that Jaime would be the one to kill her. She is solely focused on Tyrion, and yet as readers we know that the relationship between Jaime and Cersei has frayed dramatically. By A Feast for Crows, Jaime refuses to assist her after she was arrested by the Faith of the Seven. That's a pretty big leap from the Jaime in A Game of Thrones. Maybe by the end of The Winds of Winter, or sometime in A Dream of Spring, Jaime will reach the point where he will be able to take Cersei's life. The counter-argument to this is simply the logistics of the prophecy. Some feel that as Jaime has only one hand and the other is gold, he won't be able to choke her. But the great explanation here is that Jaime, echoing Tyrion, will use the chain of the hand of the king to choke Cersei, just as Tyrion did to Shae. Now, Jaime is the likeliest candidate. He's probably the Valancourt, to be honest, but there are other candidates. The prophecy is vague enough that the Valancourt doesn't have to be Cersei's little brother. Some have suggested that Tommen will kill Cersei. He is, after all, the little brother of Joffrey and Myrcella. Or it could be the Hound, who is the younger brother of the Mountain. Sandor would probably be pretty angry to hear about Gregor still serving the Lannisters as Robert Strong. Though in the end, the likeliest one is Jaime. In A Dance with Dragons, Tyrion has a dream while traveling with Illyrio. In this dream, Tyrion is participating in a battle that has turned the hills of Westeros red as blood. Tyrion is in the middle of this battle, dealing death with an axe as big as he is. He's fighting side by side with Barristan Selmy and Aegon Rivers, better known as Bittersteel. As they fight, dragons wheel across the sky. Strangely, Tyrion in this stream has 2 heads, and he fights and kills Tywin and Jaime, hacking at Jaime's face until it's a red ruin, laughing every time he strikes a blow. Only when the fight is done does Tyrion realize that his second head is weeping. So what does this mean? Dreaming of fighting alongside Barristan and Bittersteel may hint towards the upcoming Dance of the Dragons between Aegon and Daenerys. Of course, the dream specifying that Barristan and Bittersteel are fighting together is sort of strange. One would think they would be fighting each other. Maybe the dream is a hint that for a moment there will be a brief alliance between Aegon and Daenerys as they deal with the invasion of the others. This could explain why Tywin is leading the opposing army, even though Dream Tyrion recognizes that he killed him once before. Some have also suggested that the dream is a hint that Tyrion and Barristan will turn against Dany and saddle up with Aegon. This could explain why they would fight on the side of Bittersteel, the long-dead founder of the Golden Company. Maybe Tyrion will feel in the Winds of Winter that Aegon is the best shot for him to get revenge, and Barristan will change allegiances because he feels Aegon is actually a Targaryen? Honestly, having Barristan and Tyrion both switch sides is unlikely, but it's not impossible. The dream is, of course, also symbolic. The 2 heads of Tyrion can easily be seen to represent the 2 halves of Tyrion fighting over what they want. The vengeful side of Tyrion wants to kill Jaime like he did his father, but the second head, the weeping one, feels deep grief about the rift that has formed between the Lannisters, and that even with the incident regarding Tysha and the lies Jaime told Tyrion, he still, to some degree, loves Jaime. Tyrion's inner conflict is a focal point of his story, and this stream shows that pretty clearly. But having Bittersteel and Barristan show up before Tyrion even knew Barristan was alive or had any clue he was being sent to meet up with Aegon feels prophetic. So at the very least, this stream is a hint towards the deep inner conflict Tyrion is experiencing. Like G.R. Martin likes to say, it's the heart in conflict with itself. But it may also be a hint towards the war to come between Dany and Aegon. In A Storm of Swords, we are introduced to a character called the Ghost of Highheart. She's an old woman, no more than 3 feet tall, with red hair and white eyes. Most interesting of all is that she has prophetic visions. In the past, she proclaimed that Azor Ahai, the prince that was promised, would come from the line of Aerys and Rhaella, meaning that Azor Ahai could be Daenerys, or if Jon is a Targaryen, and he probably is, then he's a candidate as well. The Ghost of Highheart also describes several dreams she has during an Arya chapter about the deaths of Renly Baratheon and Balon Greyjoy, both of which come true. Later, in another Arya chapter, they return to Highheart and speak to the Ghost, and she describes another series of dreams. One of them seems to describe the Red Wedding, with talk of a lone wolf, likely Greywind, crying out a warning but to no avail, and talk of a feast with screams and horns and pipes. The second dream, though, is interesting because part of it doesn't seem to have come true just yet. The dream is described as follows. I dreamt of a maid at a feast with purple serpents in her hair, venom dripping from their fangs, and later I dreamt that maid again slaying a savage giant in a castle built of snow. The common interpretation of the first part of the dream is that it's describing Sansa during the Purple Wedding. Sansa is a maid, and the Purple Wedding was a feast, and Sansa wore a hairnet gifted to her by the drunken knight Sir Dantos that had amethyst on them. As is known, that hairnet had poison inside the amethyst, and they were used to kill Joffrey, which would make Sansa a maid with purple serpents in her hair dripping venom. But the second part of that dream, the one about slaying a savage giant in a castle of snow, doesn't seem to have come true just yet. So what does it mean? Well, House Baelish's old sigil was the Titan of Braavos, and while in the present story the sigil is now a field of silver mockingbirds, some fans think that this talk of a giant is a reference to Littlefinger. Add in the Castle of Snow, which could be Winterfell, then we have a story of Littlefinger being killed in Winterfell by Sansa. In the show, Sansa is a key player in the downfall of Littlefinger, and the same sort of thing may happen in the books, although it will probably be different in approach. But Sansa outmaneuvering Littlefinger and killing him seems pretty fitting. Right now, both of their stories are interlinked. Littlefinger's relationship with Sansa is rather off-putting. He's trying to teach her the Game of Thrones, but also he is clearly interested in her romantically and sees her as a version of Catelyn that he can mold to his liking. It's all quite unpleasant, but the twist being that Littlefinger's manipulation and grooming will fail, and in the end he will die to Sansa, or at the very least she will be complicit in his downfall, would be a very satisfying twist. Others have put forward that this vision is a misunderstanding, as during one Sansa chapter in A Feast for Crows, Sweet Robin destroys Sansa's snow castle made to look like Winterfell. In return, Sansa destroys his doll. You could cobble this all together as Sansa slaying a savage giant in a castle of snow. Or it could be a hint that Sansa will be the main player, or at the very least participate in the death of Sweet Robin, something that fans have speculated before. It seems at the very least that this is all a hint towards Sansa, and that at some point she's finally going to have some agency and take control of her destiny instead of being held captive by Cersei or Littlefinger. In a storm of swords, Jaime Lannister lays his head down on a weirwood stump and falls asleep. During his rest, he dreams a strange dream, one where he finds himself back at Casterly Rock. He's naked and alone, and finds himself forced to go deeper in the depths by a dozen tall figures with their faces hidden in their robes. Eventually, he reaches a ledge and is forced to fall down into the caves below. Down in these dark depths, he asks the question, what place is this? The response given by all the Lannisters since Lyanna the Clever is, your place. Cersei, Tywin, Joffrey, and a dozen more Lannisters in the dark then appear. Jaime asks Cersei why Tywin has brought them here, to which Cersei responds that this place, this darkness, is Jaime's. Then Brienne appears out of the darkness. She begs for a sword and one appears. Both swords are burning with a silvery blue flame. Cersei says that the flames will burn so long as Jaime lives, and then she disappears into the darkness, leaving Brienne and Jaime alone. As they attempt to make their way through the darkness, 6 men on horseback appear. These are Oswald Went, Jon Darry, Lewin Martell, Gerald Hightower, Sir Arthur Dayne, and Rhaegar Targaryen. All of these men are described as being armored in snow, and they have ghostly horses. Upon seeing these men, Brienne says that she swore an oath to defend Jaime, and Arthur Dayne responds by saying, we all swore oaths. Then the Kingsguard say, he was your king, you swore to keep him safe, and the children as well. Rhaegar says that he left his wife and children with Jaime, thinking that he would keep them safe. Jaime then says that he thought that the mountain would never hurt them, to which Arthur Dayne responds by saying he killed the king he swore to protect. Then the ghosts rush in, and Jaime awakens with a sudden start. So that was pretty long, but what does this all mean? There is obviously an aspect of Jaime's ghosts coming to hunt him. His family, his ancestors, the Kingsguard that he betrayed, but it also reveals how Jaime feels about Brienne. It is the deciding factor in Jaime going back to Harrenhal and rescuing Brienne from that bear pit. So clearly this is representative of an internal conflict deep within Jaime's psyche, one that has tortured him since he killed Aerys. As G.R. Martin likes to say, the human heart in conflict with itself. But there does appear to be a magical, even prophetic aspect to this dream. Why else have Jaime sleep on a weirwood stump? So some believe this dream may be a hint towards Jaime and Brienne assisting in the battle against the others, something they do end up doing in the show. It is curious that the dead men are said to be armored in snow. Sort of sounds like the others, doesn't it? The silvery blue swords mentioned in the dream, one held by Jaime and the other by Brienne, may be a hint towards them both carrying Valyrian steel swords. Jaime with Widow's Wail and Brienne with Oathkeeper. In order to fight the undead men armored in snow, the others, you do need Valyrian steel. So maybe this is foreshadowing of Jaime and Brienne being present during the battles against the others. It is, at the very least, the dream signifying Jaime's growing attachment to Brienne and the start of his long, long path to redemption. In the Winds of Winter sample chapter, Arion 1, Arianne arrives at Ghost Hill to rest, while on her journey from Dorne to Storm's End to meet Aegon. During this brief stay, she feasts with Lady Nymelia Toland of Ghost Hill, and more importantly, Nymelia's daughter, Teora. This is because, while Arianne is at Ghost Hill, Teora describes a dream she has. In this dream, Teora says that she sees dragons dancing, and everywhere they danced, people died. We don't hear any more details, but the dream seems pretty clear. It's a warning that Aegon and Daenerys are not going to accept ruling together. There will be no marriage between them, no union. Instead, Dany and Aegon will engage in a civil war, another dance of the dragons. In A Clash of Kings, Shireen tells Maester Cressen about a dream she had. This dream was about dragons who were coming to eat her, and apparently these sorts of nightmares have plagued Shireen as far back as Maester Cressen can remember. Still, Cressen, being the dutiful and kind maester that he is, reassures her, as he has many times before, that the stone dragons cannot come to life, so she has nothing to fear. But knowing Shireen's fate, as we learned from the show, and confirmed by G.R.R. Martin, perhaps these dreams do mean something. Maybe Shireen does have something to fear, because she's going to be burned, and this dream could be a warning about that. The dragon coming to eat her are actually the flames burning her on Stannis' orders. The line about stone dragons may be a hint that Shireen will be burned to resurrect the dead Jon Snow. He is likely a Targaryen, and Targaryens can be seen as dragons after a fashion, and death, of course, can be linked to stone. Maybe Shireen will burn so that Jon can be brought back to life. Or maybe Shireen will be burned for whatever reason Stannis comes up with, to defend against the wildlings, for good weather. Any of these options are possible. But these dreams do come not long after Daenerys' dragons hatched, and these dragon dreams may be a warning that soon, or relatively soon, dragons will once more fly across Westeros and cause great damage to Dany's enemies. Baratheons do have some Targaryen blood, so maybe Shireen simply has enough to have dragon dreams. So this could be a warning about Dany's dragons, Shireen's fate, or both. In A Dance with Dragons, Moqorro, the Red Priest sent by the High Priest of the Temple of the Light in Volantis to give counsel to Dany, has a series of visions. These range from seeing the ship that Moqorro and Tyrion are on won't reach Qarth, which is true, to correctly predicting when a storm will come and where to find 3 ships that went missing from said storm. Now, in the midst of these visions that have come true, there are 3 that hint towards future events, and seeing as Moqorro does have a gift for prophecy, we must take these 3 seriously and examine what they might mean. The first vision involves Tyrion. Moqorro says that he sees dragons, old and young, true and false, bright and dark, and Tyrion, a small man with a big shadow, snarling in the midst of it all. It's safe to say that this vision is foreshadowing the big role Tyrion is going to play in the upcoming Dance of the Dragons, and really the political situation of Westeros as a whole. The big question is, who are these young and old, true and false, bright and dark dragons? Old and young dragons could be referring to Aemon and Jon Snow, but Aemon is dead, so maybe it could be a reference to Bloodraven. There aren't really any old dragons left, it's pretty much just Bloodraven. Dragons true and false could refer to Daenerys and young Griff, Dany being an actual Targaryen and young Griff / Aegon being a false dragon because he's probably a Blackfyre. Bright and dark is the hardest to answer. Dark could be referring to Bloodraven, but it could also be referring to the Blackfyres as a whole. And maybe Bright's the same and is referring to the Targaryens as a whole. If it's not, it's sort of difficult to pin down who Bright would be. Some have said this is Aerion Brightflame. It's not really a great fit. Another take on this is that each of the pairings of adjectives are referring to one Targaryen or one claimed Targaryen. In this scenario, Daenerys is the old and young dragon. Old because she's the blood of old Valyria, and young because she's young. Young Griff is true and false because while he does have Targaryen blood, he is still a Blackfyre, and therefore not a true dragon. Jon would be bright and dark, in the moral sense that he has some tinges of darkness, and Jon may become crueler after he is resurrected, so he would be bright and dark. It could also be a reference to Jon with dark hair, and once he's resurrected he may have white hair, so he'll probably look like a Targaryen, after a fashion. You could also see a scenario in which this vision only refers to Daenerys and young Griff. In that scenario, Dany is the old blood of Valyria, Griff is the new blood of the Blackfyres. Dany is true as she is Targaryen, and young Griff is false because he's a Blackfyre. Dany is bright because of her hair and her association with flame, while young Griff is dark because he's a Blackfyre. In the second vision, Moqorro describes someone searching for Daenerys. This person is a tall and twisted thing with one black eye and 10 long arms, sailing on a sea of blood. This sounds a lot like Euron Greyjoy. He does wear an eye patch over his left eye, and that eye is described as a black eye shining with malice. This monster being described as twisted and having 10 long arms sounds like a kraken, which is the sigil of House Greyjoy. So this does seem to point to Euron, who did send Victarion off to find Daenerys and bring her back with him to Westeros. This vision is often tied into theories with the upcoming Battle of Blood, which Euron is set to engage in. This vision, and the one that Melisandre has, where towers by the sea crumble as a dark tide sweep over them, have led fans to believe that Euron, who is heavily outnumbered, is going to summon a kraken, which will probably give Euron the victory, but will no doubt cause an untold amount of carnage. Moqorro's last vision is not told to us in any detail, but Moqorro claims that he sees who he claims is Victarion and the glory that's going to await him. Seeing the Battle of Fire that is taking place in the Winds of Winter, that might be true. In the sample chapters we do have, Victarion does seem like he's smashing the Slaver Alliance. But Moqorro could be lying. Victarion isn't exactly a leader that inspires confidence, and Victarion has threatened to kill Moqorro previously, so maybe Moqorro is just telling Victarion what he wants to hear. Or maybe he's not telling him the whole vision. Maybe the battle is going to continue to go well until Victarion has one of his men use the Dragonbinder horn. and it's at that point that things go belly up. Although in the end, Dany's side will probably win this battle. Losing it would make this story even more complicated. Dany's faction would all have to flee, and it would just be a mess. But maybe Victarion will win at first, then die, or have things go wrong, or Moqorro is actually telling the truth. In A Clash of Kings, Dany seeks a meeting with the Undying Ones, warlocks of Qarth who have turned their lips, flesh, nails, and the whites of their eyes blue with continuous consumption of Shade of the Evening. In order to visit with the Undying Ones, Dany must enter their House of the Undying alone, and once inside, she experiences a set of strange visions. Some are visions of things that end up taking place in later books, like the second vision, which clearly foreshadows the Red Wedding, as it features a group of people murdered at dinner. In particular, a dead man with the head of a wolf with an iron crown on his wolf head. It's pretty clearly Robb Stark. Some are visions of events that have taken place in the past, like one vision which depicts the death of Viserys Targaryen. But some are more mysterious, or relevant to the future of the story, and it is those visions that this section will discuss. So removing all the ones that have already taken place, or have pretty clear meanings, we have 9 to go over. The first vision is of the house with the red door. If you aren't aware of Lemongate, well, I do discuss it in my mystery section of the series, but to explain it for this video, lemons do not grow in Braavos, yet the house with the red door is said to be in Braavos, and it has a lemon tree. This has led some fans to theorize that the house with the red door was in Dorne, or at the very least not in Braavos, and this vision does seem to be hinting towards that mystery. It should also be said that the house with the red door is important to Dany because it was the last place she felt she had a home. So it doesn't have to be a hint towards a deeper mystery, but J.R. Martin has said that the red door will eventually be explained. So there must be something there. So maybe it really was in Dorne. In the second vision, Dany sees Rhaegar Targaryen with a woman, who is probably Elia Martell. Rhaegar is holding a baby, whom he names Aegon, and Rhaegar believes is the prince that was promised. The vision ends with Rhaegar saying he must have one more child, as the dragon has 3 heads. This vision is pretty important. It tells us that Rhaegar was fully aware of the Azor Ahai prophecy, and that he believed he had an important role in fulfilling it. Perhaps at some point Rhaegar believed he was the prince that was promised, but by this point he had clearly changed his mind. It's also significant that Rhaegar believed that his children were the 3 heads of the dragon. That could be true, but there is a tendency for prophecy to be misunderstood in these books. So the dragon with the 3 heads could instead be Dany's dragons, or, and this seems the most likely, it is referring to Jon, Dany, and Aegon/Young Griff. Even if Aegon is a Blackfyre, he is still part Targaryen. In the third vision, Dany sees a blue-eyed king who casts no shadow and has a red sword in hand. The popular consensus is that this is Stannis, and seeing as Stannis has blue eyes, killed his own brother with a shadow baby, and does have a red sword, as in it's sword on fire, it's probably him. While this vision may just be foreshadowing for the events of Clash and Storm, some have said that mentioning the blue eyes in particular is a hint towards Stannis' plotline in The Winds of Winter. Many theories have floated around for years at this point that Stannis may become the Night's King, a book-only character who married an Other. The fifth vision is a rather well-known one, because it's the famous Mummer's Dragon vision, as in, it's the one where a cloth dragon sways on a pole amidst the cheering crowd. This vision almost certainly references Aegon. If he is a Blackfyre, which he likely is, then he would be a Mummer's Dragon. And since he's likely to take the city from Cersei, a very unpopular ruler, no doubt there'll be cheering crowds as he takes the throne. Dany will probably not take too well to hearing that a so-called Targaryen has just taken the capital of Westeros and has the love of the people. When she hears about this, she will likely connect it to this vision, and may believe quite quickly that Aegon is not who he says he is. The fifth vision depicts a great stone beast taking flight from a smoking tower, breathing shadow. One explanation is that this vision is about Stannis wanting to sacrifice Edric Storm to wake dragons from stone, which could be a cut plot or an alternate reality event. There are several visions in the House of the Undying of futures that never came, but the vision could also be a hint of something that is actually going to happen. Many fans have speculated that somehow the dragon statues of Dragonstone will be awakened with magic. It could happen, but it's not set in stone. The next vision depicts a corpse standing on the prow of a ship, eyes bright in his dead face, smiling sadly with grey lips. This vision is usually associated with Euron or Victarion or Aeron, or all 3. Euron and Victarion seem the most important to Dany's story, so one would imagine this refers to them. Victarion will likely meet Dany in the Winds of Winter, providing he doesn't die. Dany has to return to Meereen at some point, and Victarion will likely be there, so maybe it's meant to be him. If it isn't meant to represent any of the Greyjoys, others have put forward Jon Con. He is a man dying of grayscale, so he is a corpse in the sense that he's a dead man walking. Perhaps the grey lips is a hint towards that grayscale infection he has. The 8th vision on our list is likely the most well known. This is because this vision shows a blue flower growing out of a wall of ice. Many use this as a key piece of evidence that Jon Snow is Lyanna's son. Lyanna is often associated with blue roses. Basically, anytime she is brought up in a Game of Thrones, something about blue roses will be in there. So many see this blue rose as Jon, Lyanna's son, at the wall. The next vision once again depicts the House with the Red Door. Like before, this is probably a hint that this house contains some secrets, such as it was not actually in Braavos. Seeing as this is the second time it's shown to us in one chapter, it's likely to be an important reveal. The last vision depicts the crones of Vaes Dothrak kneeling before Daenerys. This seems to be foreshadowing of Dany returning to Vaes Dothrak and uniting the Dothraki. Now, if that's actually feasible in Winds, it's up for debate, but this vision does suggest at least that J.R. Martin had that as a plan. Dany in A Dance with Dragons is captured by the Dothraki, so maybe they'll take her back to Vaes Dothrak, and while there, Dany will use Drogon to unite all the 𝐾𝐿isars and take them to Westeros. In A Game of Thrones, we learn that Jon Snow has a reoccurring dream where he is at Winterfell. He's looking for Ned or Arya, Robb or Benjen. However, he is never able to find them, and while he's searching, the rookery is always empty, and the stables are full of bones. Jon always becomes frightened by that point. He throws open doors and takes stairs 3 steps at a time, but he never finds a soul. Eventually, Jon finds himself heading down to the crypts, as he says that he knows he has to go down there, even though he's afraid of what's awaiting him. So in these dreams, Jon heads down, and it gets darker and darker, until eventually Jon wants to scream. Then he wakes up. In A Storm of Swords, we hear of the dream again. Jon is in the crypts, walking past the long-dead Stark kings. Their statues watch him and say, "You are no Stark. There is no place for you here. Go away." But Jon presses on, searching for Ned or Bran, Rickon or Benjen. Then Jon hears drums, and he knows that above him they are feasting in the Great Hall. But Jon is not welcome. These crypts are not Jon's place, he realizes, and the dream ends. If R+L=J is true, which it probably is, then Jon is the child of Rhaegar Targaryen and Lyanna Stark. This could help explain this dream. It's a hint that Jon is actually a Targaryen. That would explain why the crypts are not his place, why the long-dead kings think he is not a Stark. Now, of course, Jon is a Stark, at least half. That applies no matter if he is a Targaryen or a bastard. He still has one Stark parent. But these dreams get the point across. There is something more to Jon's identity. This dream might also be a hint that the crypts themselves will play an important role in the reveal of Jon's parentage. Some have said that he'll learn the truth next to his mother, who is buried down there, and some others believe that Rhaegar's harp is down there as well, and it will be used to prove a relationship between Lyanna and Rhaegar. In summary, Jon has a recurring dream about the Winterfell crypts, one that hints towards the truth about his identity, foreshadowing who he really is. In A Clash of Kings, we are introduced to Quaithe, one of the 3 representatives of Qarth, who meets with Dany and warns her about those who'd come to take her dragons, because dragons are fire made flesh, and fire is power. But that's a rather straightforward warning and doesn't need analysis. Instead, it's the things that Quaithe says later that needs to be explained. First is the claim that in order for Daenerys to go north, she must journey south. To reach the west, she must go east. To go forward, she must go back. And to touch the light, she must pass beneath the shadow. Quaithe wants Dany to go to Ahai. When Dany asks why, what would she find there, Quaithe responds, the truth. Seeing as this particular reply happens in Clash, it might be a cut plotline. J.R. Martin does change his mind from time to time, and so Dany might never go to Ahai. It is important to note that when J.R. Martin was asked if he would ever see Ahai, he replied only in memory or flashback, if at all. But seeing as this conversation is mentioned in A Dance with Dragons, it must still have some relevance. It could mean that in order for Dany to go to Westeros, she will have to pass by Ahai, thus pass beneath the shadow. Maybe she won't go to Ahai, but simply sail by it. Another interpretation comes from the events of Dany's 10th chapter in A Dance with Dragons. This is the chapter where she's walking south back to Meereen and spends some time in a cave in a hill that she calls Dragonstone. Eventually she falls ill, hallucinates, and then is found by the Dothraki. Some have claimed that this chapter represents the prophecy in a more subtle way. This is because in the chapter when Dany is captured by the Dothraki, she's forced to go north with them. If this is to be like the show, she will gain a Dothraki army from this journey. There's also the mother of the mountains at Base Dothrak, and that could be the shadow that Dany must pass beneath. Quaithe also says, "Hear me, Daenerys Targaryen, the glass candles are burning. Soon comes the Pale Mare, and after her the others, Kraken and Dark Flame, Lion and Griffin, the Sun's Son and the Mummer's Dragon. Trust none of them. Remember the Undying. Beware the perfumed seneschal." Now, as to the glass candles, there is a question of how much importance they actually have, because drafts of A Feast for Crows did place a bit more importance on them, and that isn't in the published version. So the glass candles burning might not mean that much other than, yeah, magic is coming back into the world, which is a theme that's been in the series basically the whole time. But if the glass candles are still important, it could be a warning that some are using the glass candles to spy on Dany, or enter her dreams like Quaithe. The next bit about the Pale Mare and others comes true. Disease is ravaging Meereen at the moment. Kraken, Dark Flame, Lion and Griffin, the Sun's Son, and the Mummer's Dragon. It's a bit of a mouthful, but the meaning is pretty clear. Kraken is Victarion Greyjoy, who's in the Bay of Meereen by the Winds of Winter. Dark Flame likely refers to Moqorro, the Red Priest. Lion is Tyrion, while Griffin is Jon Connington. The Sun's Son is Quentyn Martell. And the Mummer's Dragon is likely young Griff/Aegon. While Quaithe may not be trustworthy herself, after all, we do not know her motivations, her warning about not trusting these list of characters is pretty sound. I mean, would you trust Victarion or Tyrion? As to the last bit about the perfume seneschal, this could apply to several characters. Some have said it's Resnack, he certainly isn't trustworthy, and he is a perfume seneschal. Others have suggested Varys, which also fits. As before, whatever Quaithe is up to, her warning to Dany about not trusting any of these characters is perfectly valid. Jojen Reed has green dreams. This is well known, but one aspect of Jojen's ability is that he claims he's been told when he will die. This is interesting because Jojen grows sullen and somewhat depressed as he journeys north with Bran, Meera, and Hodor. By the time they've arrived at Bloodraven's cave, well, he seems resigned to his fate. This is where the popular Jojenpaste theory comes into play. Fans believe that the weirwood paste that Bran eats during his last chapter may not just be made of weirwood, but also may be made of Jojen too. Bran does note that it looks like the paste has some blood in it, and magic in this world does seem particularly bloodthirsty, requiring sacrifices pretty often. Add that in with Jojen's increasingly fatalistic attitude, does sort of seem like Jojen was sacrificed. Recall this line in a Bran chapter. When singers die, they become part of that godhood. Bran's eyes widened. They're going to kill me? No, Meera said. Jojen, you're scaring him. He is not the one who needs to be afraid. It is strange that Jojen thinks he should be afraid in the cave, even though, as far as we know, the only threats are outside in the form of the others. No matter what, Jojen seems to firmly believe that his death is near. While most agree he is likely paced, sacrificed to give Bran power, he seems to be dead either by the end of A Dance with Dragons or sometime in the Winds of Winter. Patchface is the strange court jester that Shireen Baratheon keeps around. Apparently, he was once a skilled jester in Essos. He could sing in 4 languages, speak riddles, perform magic, and juggle. He was as nimble as a monkey and witty as a dozen courtiers. Unfortunately, while returning home to Westeros with his new lord Steffon Baratheon, their ship sank, and Patchface, alongside Steffon and the rest of the crew, drowned. Or so it was thought. 3 days later, Patchface washed up looking quite dead, until a servant grabbed him and suddenly coughed up water. Whatever happened to Patchface in those 3 days broke him, and he has never been the same. By the time of the books, he just follows Shireen Baratheon around, keeping her company and saying strange things. Most people ignore Patchface, but Melisandre says he's dangerous, and some have suggested that the things Patchface says may be prophetic. So having said that, what has Patchface been saying, and what does it mean? First, it is important to say that the Clash of Kings Patchface sayings are not being covered. This is because most of them are related to events that have now since occurred, like this one, which is assumed by most to be about the Red Wedding, or this one, which hints towards the Battle of the Blackwater. But Patchface is in A Dance with Dragons, and since that's the newest book, some of these lines must be relevant. In the dark, the dead are dancing. Patchface shuffled his feet in a grotesque dance step. I know. Oh, oh, oh. This is probably a reference to whites. Really, what other dead could be seen as dancing? In particular, it could be referring to the dead wildlings that Jon had put in those cells to see if they would rise as whites. Maybe Patchface sees that in the darkness of those cells, the whites are waiting. Another line reads, "Under the sea, the mermen feast on starfish soup, and all the serving men are crabs. Some believe this is talking about the Manderleys and the Boltons. A merman is the sigil of House Manderley, and the starfish kind of looks like the Bolton sigil, which is a flayed man. So this could be saying that the Manderleys are going to kill some Boltons, which certainly seems like it's going to happen. Under the sea, the crows are white as snow. I know, I know. Oh, oh, oh. This could be a reference to Bloodraven. He is corpse white, and he was a member of the Night's Watch, a crow. It may also be a reference to Jon. There are plenty of fans who think Jon's hair will go white once he's resurrected, and then he would be a white crow. Really though, this could also be about any of the rangers killed by the others. Come with me beneath the sea, away, away, away. This could be Patchface trying to lead Shireen away. Maybe he sees her death and wants to protect her. Or in a darker twist, it could be Patchface leading Shireen to her fate. Patchface jumped up. I will lead it. We will march into the sea and out again. Under the waves, we will ride seahorses, and mermaids will blow seashells to announce our coming. This line could be about resurrection. If you assume that under the sea is about death, then maybe Jon will march into the sea and back out again. But it is plural, so maybe it's about the whites and the others who are coming south, and if they're seen, horns will certainly announce they're coming. Under the sea, men marry fishes. This could be reference to the marriages between the wildlings and the Westerosi men taking place in A Dance with Dragons. It could also be about the Night's King, as in marrying another. Plenty of fans think that Stannis is another Night's King, so maybe Patchface can see that in his visions. Patchface's prophecies are vague, frustrating, and frankly, moving on to the next section sounds wonderful. Throughout the books, Melisandre is able to see visions while gazing into the flames. Some doubt the extent of Melisandre's magical ability and her motives, both of which are completely fair doubts to have. But in terms of gazing into the flames, Mel does see things that come true, even if she does misinterpret them quite often. So having said that, let's look at the visions Mel has while peering into the flames that do not seem to have come true just yet, or haven't had their meaning revealed. One vision is about Patchface, the jester that follows Shireen Baratheon around. Mel says that Patchface is dangerous, that many a time she's glimpsed him in her flames. Sometimes there are skulls around him, and his lips are red. Patchface does appear to be genuinely prophetic, as discussed, and many think he's a servant of the drowned god, but dangerous, really. Mel could be misinterpreting this vision, as she often does. I mean, a man who drowned to death alongside an entire crew at sea would probably have skulls about him. Or because he can foresee the deaths of people, he has skulls around. Or Mel's right, and Patchface is indeed a genuine threat and will attack or hurt people in the future. But so far, we have no indication of that. Patchface just appears to be a strange, broken, mad man who was brought back from a watery grave and now just spouts prophecy. In another vision, Mel sees a face taking shape within a hearth. Mel thinks it's Stannis at first, but she quickly realizes it's not. It's a wooden face, corpse white, and Melisandre wonders if it's the enemy. Then she sees 1,000 red eyes in the flames, and beside the wooden face, a boy with a wolf's face, who throws back his head and howls. She also realizes that this corpse can see her. This one's pretty clear. It's Bloodraven and Bran. The description leaves little room other than them. It is curious that Mel wonders if Bloodraven is the enemy, but she does end up convincing herself that Bran and Bloodraven are servants of the Lord of Light. Still, it's an interesting question. Is Bloodraven truly on the side of humanity? This isn't saying if he's good or evil. He's clearly done some pretty terrible things. But is he still serving humanity? Is he trying to protect them from the others? He has helped Bran so far, and he seems to be against the others, but there is some darkness there. Also, Mel thinks that Bloodraven can see her. If that's true, does that mean one can communicate via flame, even if one of the participants of the magical call is not using the flame? This seems to be the case, but so far there's yet to be another obvious instance of this occurring. In another vision, Mel sees dead things shambling silently through the cold beneath a great grey cliff, where there are fires burning inside 100 caves. Then she sees the wind rising and white mist sweeping in. It's impossibly cold, and one by one, the fires go out. Afterwards, only skulls remain. This one's also pretty easy to understand. This vision is almost certainly talking about Hardhome. Hardhome is known to have a massive cliff that overlooks the settlement, and it's riddled with caves. We know from what 𝐃𝐫𝐞𝐚𝐦𝐬 was telling Jon in his letters that things there are pretty bad. Horrifyingly bad, actually. There's talk of dead things in the water, and the caves are full of people screaming. This all seems to mean that Hardhome is already lost, that something like the show, minus Jon of course, has already occurred. This means that the White Army being led by the Others has just been boosted by potentially thousands of deaths. It's a total disaster and foreshadowing of the dark conflict to come in the Winds of Winter. After that, there's another vision that Mel has. In this one, she sees towers by the sea, crumbling as the dark tide comes sweeping over them, rising from the depths. Melisandre at first thinks it's Eastwatch, but she does have some doubts, thinking that the towers in her vision are different. It could be Eastwatch, at least from the description. When the Others come sweeping across the land, they very well may take out Eastwatch. But many fans believe that this vision is actually about a different set of towers, ones very far from the wall. These towers are usually seen as the Three Towers, the seat of House 𝐃𝐫𝐞𝐚𝐦𝐬, and usually the High Tower located in Old Town. Both of these are somewhat close to the upcoming Battle of Blood. This is the battle between the Ironborn led by Euron Greyjoy and the Red Wine Fleet. There's a pretty popular theory out there that during this battle, Euron is going to summon Krakens and win the day. Of course, magic is unpredictable and dangerous, so the Krakens might very well cause some damage to the Ironborn and anyone else unlucky enough to be near. This may include those towers. They could come down. Or this is simply a way to foreshadow the bloodiness of the war Euron is about to wage. Honestly, it could be Eastwatch, the Three Towers, and High Tower. All of them are near the sea and are all at risk of a dark tide sweeping over them. Eastwatch being the Others, and the Three Towers and High Tower being Euron and his blood magic. To finish off this section, let's discuss what Melisandre sees in the flames about Jon Snow. She does accurately see that Jon is soon to die, warning him of daggers in the dark. But Jon, as we all know, brushes it off, much to his detriment. Mel also wishes to see her King Stannis, who she believes is Azor Ahai in the flames, that all Mel sees is snow. This is pretty interesting in that it certainly hints towards Jon being Azor Ahai. But is he? That's a whole nother question, one we will be examining later. But for now, we can see that Azor Ahai and Jon are being connected. And lastly, Mel sees Jon with skulls all around him, a hint, no doubt, towards the Others, the danger he's in, and the death that not only surrounds him now, but will especially surround him if he goes south to fight the Boltons. What is more interesting here is that Mel sees Jon as a man, then a wolf, then as a man again. This has been taken as a hint towards the logistics of Jon's resurrection. Since he's a warg, his soul may have gone into his direwolf ghost. What will a Firewhite Jon be like? Especially one who was a wolf for a time? We can't know for certain. Unfortunately, the show in this regard isn't a huge help. After Jon comes back in Season 6, not much changes. But seeing Beric Dondarrion and Lady Stoneheart in the books, well, Jon's gonna be different too. He could be full of vengeance. He may be colder, crueler, and somewhat wolfish. A Jon who's been betrayed and murdered by the Night's Watch may not care so much about honor, and may end up doing what he feels must be done, namely the defeat of the Others, and probably the Boltons too. Jon in the Winds of Winter may be a very different character, but we'll just have to wait and see. Azor Ahai was a mythical warrior who battled against the Others during the Long Night. He was a great warrior, but needed a great sword. So for 30 days and 30 nights, he forged a sword at a temple, but while attempting to temper it, the sword broke. The next time, he did it for 50 days and 50 nights. And to temper the sword, he stabbed it into a lion's heart. The sword still broke, so for the third attempt, Azor Ahai labored for 100 days and 100 nights. And to temper the sword, he thrust it through his wife, Nissa, and used her soul to create the sword Lightbringer. With his magical sword that upon contact with the Others would make them burst into flame, Azor Ahai led virtuous men against the Others, and defeated them during the Battle of the Dawn. But obviously from the books, we know the Others were not permanently defeated. And this is where the Azor Ahai prophecy comes into play. As we read, in ancient books of Ahai, it is written that there will come a day after a long summer when the stars bleed, and the cold breath of darkness falls heavy on the world. In this dread hour, a warrior shall draw from the fire a burning sword, and that sword shall be Lightbringer, the red sword of heroes. And he who clasps it shall be Azor Ahai come again, and the darkness shall flee before him. We also hear that Azor Ahai will be born of smoke and salt, and wake dragons from stone. Now, before we can speculate on who the reborn Azor Ahai might be, there's another aspect to this prophecy that merits discussion. Because, of course, this is a Song of Ice and Fire, and nothing can be simple. When Melisandre speaks of Azor Ahai, she uses the phrase, the prince that was promised. Since this phrase is used interchangeably, most generally assume it's just another way to refer to the reborn Azor Ahai, but others aren't so sure. And they believe that the prince that was promised and Azor Ahai are referring to different people. So maybe Azor Ahai and the prince that was promised are separate, although of course we don't know for sure. What we do know, though, is that the prince that was promised prophecy is different. According to the ghost of Higheart, who, as shown earlier in the video, has prophetic visions, the prince will emerge from the line of Aerys and Rhaella. Interestingly enough, though, the word in the original text of the prophecy for prince, the Valyrian word for dragon, is actually gender neutral. You may begin to see the difficulty of putting this all together. Since the prince that was promised and Azor Ahai are used interchangeably, then maybe it's one person. If it is one person, the likeliest options are Daenerys or Jon. Dany was born on Dragonstone, which is seen as the Salt, and then reborn during the funeral pyre. There she woke dragons from stone, and then the comet appeared. Seeing as the prince that was promised is said to come from the line of Aerys and Rhaella, Dany's parents, she does seem to be Azor Ahai, or at the very least, one of the likeliest options. Now, of course, it could also be Jon Snow. If he is the son of Rhaegar and Lyanna, then he is from the line of Aerys and Rhaella as well. In terms of being born amidst smoke and salt, some fans believe this is referring to the murder of Jon Snow. When he's stabbed by Bowen Marsh and all the others, his wound smokes and Bowen Marsh cries. There's the salt and the smoke. For the bleeding star, we have Sir Patrick, that poor man who was picked up and killed by Woon the Giant. Sir Patrick's heraldry is a star, and the star is bloody, seeing as Patrick is dead. There's the bleeding star, and there's the salt and smoke. Jon also has a dream where he seems to be wielding Lightbringer against the others, and when Melisandre asks to see Azor Ahai in the flames, she only sees snow. So Jon is another very likely option. So the prince that was promised in Azor Ahai could be the same, and that means it could be Jon or Dany. But if we assume for a moment they're different people, then perhaps Jon is Azor Ahai, while Daenerys is the prince that was promised. It seems pretty strange for the story to specifically mention that the original translation of the prince that was promised prophecy is gender neutral, unless it's a hint that the prince could be a woman. In that case, Dany is far and above the likeliest candidate. It could be that Dany is the prince that was promised, and Jon is Azor Ahai. Or, in the end, the prophecy doesn't mean anything. It's not important. It may even be false, which could very well be true. But if these prophecies are false, then why waste all this time? Maybe this is just a plot point gone awry, something that isn't going to really work if these books are ever finished. But if these prophecies are important, they are in every book after all, it will probably mean that being a prophesized hero sucks. That in the end, Dany and Jon are going to suffer greatly. We don't know how their stories are going to end. It could be like the show, or it could be completely different. But it's pretty safe to assume they're going to suffer in The Winds of Winter and A Dream of Spring. Both of them may not even survive the series. Unfortunately, we just don't know, and all we can do is hope that The Winds of Winter one day releases. Not that it will tell us who Azor Ahai is, that'll probably only be revealed in A Dream of Spring, and that book is almost certainly never going to come out. But maybe The Winds of Winter, if it ever releases, can provide enough evidence for us to pretty confidently pin down who it is. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, there's a couple more in the series, and there are more A Song of Ice and Fire videos to come.